السلام عليكم ورحمة الله، مرحبا بكم، أهلا وسهلا. نحن اليوم في الدرس السابع عشرة. We're now on lesson 17. And as normal, inshallah, I'll read the dialogue and then we'll highlight the points of benefit that we'll be studying and covering within this lesson, inshallah. So just going to start from here. لما خرجت من الفصل يا عمار؟ خرجت لأشرب الماء. خرجت لأشرب الماء. ولما خرج ياسر معك؟ هو خرج ليغسل وجهه. يا أستاذ، أنا أريد أن أجلس هنا أمامك، مقعدي بعيد عنك، ومن هناك لا أرى ما تكتب على السبورة. يمكنك أن تجلس هنا الآن. هذا مقعد حمزة وهو غائب منذ أسبوع. اسمعوا يا أبنائي، تبدأ عطلة الصيف بعد شهر. أين تذهبون في هذه العطلة؟ نريد أن نذهب إلى بلادنا. أين تريد أن تذهب أنت يا هاشم؟ أريد أن أذهب إلى مصر. لما تريد أن تذهب إلى مصر؟ أريد أن أذهب إلى مصر لأزور أخي الذي يدرس في جامعة الأزهر. وأين تريد أن تذهب أنت يا يوسف؟ أريد أن أذهب إلى لندن. ألا تريد أن تذهب إلى بلدك؟ نعم، لا أريد أن أذهب إلى بلدي هذه السنة. أريد أن أذهب إلى لندن لأدرس اللغة الإنجليزية هناك. ألا يمكنك أن تدرس اللغة الإنجليزية في بلدك؟ نعم، لا يمكنني ذلك لأن أهل بلدي يدرسون اللغة الفرنسية ولا يدرسون اللغة الإنجليزية. أو لأن أهل البلد يدرسون اللغة الفرنسية ولا يدرسون اللغة الإنجليزية. في أي كلية تريد أن تدرس في العام المقبل يا مروان؟ أريد أن أدرس في كلية الشريعة. في أي كلية تريد أن تدرس أنت يا موسى؟ لا يمكنني أن أدرس بالجامعة في العام المقبل، ذلك لأنني مريض وأريد أن أذهب إلى الولايات المتحدة للعلاج. شفاك الله. يا أستاذ، يكاد الجرس يرن. أرجو أن تسمح لنا بالخروج الآن قبل أن يخرج الطلاب الآخرون. بقي 3 دقائق، يمكنكم الخروج الآن. اخرجوا بهدوء. طيب. So inshallah, there is a number of rules that we learn within this lesson. The first is here with li ashraba and li yaghsila and ajlisa. I'm just going to highlight where we're going to be focusing on the new things that we'll focus on this lesson, inshallah. So that's just the likes of them, because there's many of this structure repeated within this dialogue. So we'll come to see it when we go through the exercises. But of the things that to bear in mind now, we have started to cover often throughout this book things that make the verb or the noun especially take a different vowel sound as the last letter, either fatha, kasra or dhamma. So now we're going to be focused on what makes the verb take fatha on the last letter of the verb. And that's what we are covering within this lesson, inshallah ta'ala. So the first 2 exercises, 1 and 2, are based on the dialogue. So here's just أجب الأسئلة الآتية, answer the following questions. As for number 2, it says اقرأ ما قاله همايون للمدرس ثم املأ الفراغات فيما يلي على ضوء ذلك. So you need to go back to the dialogue and read what Humayun said to the teacher and fill in the empty spaces with what he said. Okay, we're going to see and understand why you are to do this, inshallah. So these 3 questions is basically, if we was in a classroom setting, I would ask you as students the following question: أين تريد أن تذهب في عطلة الصيف؟ في أي كلية تريد أن تدرس؟ لماذا خرجت من الفصل؟ So there's three questions. Now if we look at these questions now and just highlight something here, we have an تذهب, an تدرس. So the main thing that we are covering in this lesson is an, like this. But this an, it comes before a verb. Okay, so what happens to the verb that comes after it though? If it's in the present tense, then it takes fatha or something that represents fatha, which we'll come to learn as we study. So for example, I said, if we look at this, it says turidu. They're both present tense verbs. Turidu is a present tense verb, meaning you want. Now turidu, if you say, for example, you want something directly, you don't need an. But when you want to say you want to do something, or I want to do something, wanting to do something, but the second action is introduced by an. So turidu an. Now this is going to make the verb take fatha. So we say tadhaba. Tadhaba. So whatever verb comes after an, that is present tense, it takes fatha. Just as we saw here, it says في أي كلية تريد أن تدرس. تدرس. In which faculty would you like to study? So the an affects the present tense verb by making it take fatha or its equivalent. For example, the sound masculine plural of the verb, which is تذهبون, for example, تفعلون. So let's say it's تريدون. Same sentence, and the sign of sukoon of fatha now is deleting the noon. So the sign of fatha for the plural verb, we're not going to say turiduna, we're going to say we're not going to say tadhabuna, we're going to say tadhabu, like this, because the noon is deleted as a sign that is equivalent to fatha for those verbs. We will study this anyway, but that's just something to be aware of throughout your studies anyway. So it's good to hear it now, and you'll just hear it again when it comes up. So here it says لماذا خرجت من الفصل. As we just learnt that an has an effect on the verb. An makes the verb take fatha or its equivalent. Another particle in the Arabic language, another harf that has that effect is lam. So we say li plus the verb. Okay, so if we look at li plus the verb, li, that looks like the preposition that means belongs to, or like this, plus the al-fi'l al-mudari', the present tense verb, it makes it also take fatha. So for example, li adhaba, and it usually means in order to. So for example, if you had the question لماذا خرجت من الفصل, why did you leave the classroom? لأذهب إلى المدير, so I could go to the headmaster. So لأذهب, the li introduces the why, in order to. So it makes the verb also take fatha or its equivalent. So if you look at the options here, it says أشرب الماء, so it's going to be لأشرب الماء. أدخل المرحاض لأدخل, because the li, this li that comes plus before the فعل المضارع makes the فعل المضارع take fatha, and in that circumstance it means in order to. In order to. So why did you do something? What? It's just, that's the question. لماذا فعلت هذا وهذا? Why did you do this and whatever? Then you say لي أكتب أو لأخرج, for example, in order to. And whatever you introduce from the present tense verb is going to take fatha as previously mentioned. Then if you look here, it says اقرأ ما يلي. These are sentences that are illustrating the usage of an. أريد أن أذهب. You see, أذهب, not أذهب. أذهب takes fatha. إلى المستوصف. نسيت أن أقول لك شيئا, I forgot to tell you something. أن أقول, you see, after an, the verb takes fatha. So what you should do now is read through these sentences and translate them into English to show that you understand them. Then it says أجب عن الأسئلة الآتية مستعملا أن. So answer the following questions. There are going to be a number of questions here and then on the next page also, using an. So you need to answer your question with an, using an. So look at the examples of the sentences that have preceded, how you would use and what it actually does to the verb, i.e. it makes the verb take fatha. So as we mentioned, here was some questions that is for you to answer using an. Now it says اقرأ الأمثلة الآتية للام التعليل. So read the following examples for lam al-ta'lil. So lam al-ta'lil is the lam that we were just discussing when it mentioned لأذهب, لأشرب, لأخرج, for example, which means the lam that means in order to. So ندرس اللغة العربية لنفهم القرآن الكريم والحديث النبوي الشريف. So we study the Arabic language لنفهم, in order to understand. Okay, so see لنفهم, the verb takes fatha, not لنفهم, لنفهم. Okay. قام المدرس ليكتب, the teacher stood up to write, in order to write. Got up in order to write. ليكتب, not ليكتب, no, ليكتب. So read these sentences, observing the usage of li, which means in order to, with the present tense verb, and it makes it the present tense verb take fatha. It says أجب الأسئلة الآتية مستعملا لام التعليل. So then now answer the following questions 1 to 10 using lam al-ta'lid, the lam that means in order to, just like we mentioned regarding an. And here it says لا, يعني تأمل ما يلي, لا يمكنك, لا يمكن, like this, يمكنك. So this verb أمكن يمكن, the verb is أمكن, and it's form 4 أفعل يفعل يمكن. It's an impersonal verb. So we've learned verbs that translate like conjugate, like تذهبون, تذهبان, نذهب, أذهب, and all the likes. With يمكن, no, it's impersonal. So what happens is it means it's possible. So it's impersonal. It's impersonal. So as you can see in the first examples, لا يمكنك. When you want to say that, when you want to talk about who is possible for, we add it as a pronoun. As a pronoun. Or if it's going to be a sentence after it, basically, the verb is going to introduce who you're talking about. So تجلس is for anta, of course. So I don't need to say يمكنك. I say لا يمكن أن تجلس. Okay? It's not possible to sit. هنا, here. Okay? هذا مقعد عثمان. يمكنك أن تخرج من الفصل الآن. يمكنك الخروج. So basically, what we can do, when we use the an plus the الفعل المضارع, we use an plus the present tense verb. For example, أن تخرج, يمكن أن تخرج. Or we can use an plus المصدر, the verbal noun, plus the masdar. So for example, I say يمكنك, it's possible for you, الخروج, الآن, which means you're able to leave now, you can leave now. Okay, so I can say this as يمكنك الخروج الآن, or I can swap this for the verb and say يمكنك أن تخرج. So if I use the masdar, the verbal noun, then I don't need an. I don't use an. I say, for example, يمكنك الذهاب, you may go. يمكنك الخروج, you may leave and exit, like this. So that's something to ponder over in these sentences. And remember, yumkinu, amkana yumkinu is an impersonal verb. It doesn't conjugate for each pronoun. You attach the pronoun at the end to show who you are talking about. Say yumkinuha, she can, like this. Yumkinuhu, he's able to. It says تأمل الأمثلة لمنذ. So now you got some sentences on the next page also using منذ. And منذ means since or for in terms of time period. So I said ما رأيت محمدا منذ يوم الجمعة. So that would translate as I haven't seen Muhammad since منذ, since يوم الجمعة. And what comes after it is مضاف إليه. So I haven't seen Muhammad since Yawm al-Jum'ah, and we'll see more examples on the next page, inshallah. So as you can see here, هو غائب منذ أسبوع. So he's been absent for a week now, for a week. So or since a week ago. You can translate it both ways. So as I mentioned, منذ means for or since. Here I would say for. I say هو غائب منذ أسبوع. He's been absent for a week, like this. And just read the following sentences, translate them, ponder over the usage of mundu, which means since, when expressing a duration of time something has been happening for. It says تأمل ما يلي هو يرى أنت ترى أنا أرى نحن نرى. Now this is looking at the verb رأى in the present tense becomes يرى. Yara, ara, nara, like this. Okay, so that's just something to bear in mind, this verb, ra'a. But when it's in the past tense, conjugation, it's ra'aytu for ana, ra'ayta for anta, ra'ayti for anti. But in the present tense, yara, ara, nara, like this. And we will study, because this is a weak verb anyway, we're going to study this towards the end of the book, inshallah, the weak verbs that end in one of the weak letters, alif, waw, or ya. And here it says, تأمل ما يلي, ponder over what follows. أرجو أن تسمح لي بالجلوس هنا. So أرجو is another verb like أريد, to say I hope. And then you introduce it with an action. And obviously, because the introduction of action, as I mentioned for أريد, أرجو, I hope, أن تسمح, that you will allow لي, me, بالجلوس هنا, you will allow me to sit here. Okay, so that's the usage of أن. Again, أرجو أن تسمح لي بالجلوس هنا, أرجو أن تسمح له بالخروج. So again, أرجو, I hope, and that which action you want to introduce after an. Bearing in mind that remembering that an makes the verb take what? Fatha. Then it says هذه أسماء فصول السنة. الشتاء winter, الربيع spring, الصيف summer, الخريف autumn. So that's just something to memorize as vocab, the names of these different seasons of the year, inshallah. So just make sure you do all the exercises, ponder over the meanings of the words that you don't know, make sure you get to know them and learn them, inshallah. And if you have any questions throughout your studies, please do not hesitate to message me. Jazakumullahu khairan, and I'll see you guys next lesson. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.